My name's Julian. I'm 27, and this all started with a voicemail I almost didn't check. It was a Monday afternoon, gray skies, drizzling. One of those days where everything feels like it's moving in slow motion. I was elbow deep in invoices at the accounting office I work for when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail again, but something in me, maybe the weird quiet of the office, told me to check. I stepped out into the hallway and played it back. It was a law firm in the city. They were calling to notify me that the reading of my grandmother Eleanor's will was scheduled for Friday. My presence, they said, was formally requested. Now, let me be clear. I hadn't spoken to most of my extended family in years. After my mom died when I was 16, things got tense. My Aunt Melinda and Uncle Ron made it pretty clear I was only family through my mother and that I shouldn't expect much from them. After the funeral, they didn't even call. No holidays, no birthdays, just silence. The only person who kept in touch was Grandma Eleanor. She called me every few months, sent cards on my birthday, and once even wired me $500 during my third year of college when my laptop died during finals week. She never said much about the rest of the family, just that she loved me and missed my mother. So when I got the message about the will reading, I assumed it was just a courtesy. I figured Eleanor had left some things to my aunt and uncle, maybe a few keepsakes for me out of sentimentality, a music box, maybe an old photo album. Still, I took the day off work and drove into the city. Not because I expected anything, but because I knew it would have meant something to her. The law office was one of those places that looked more like a museum than anything legal: wood-paneled walls, antique lamps, even a little fountain in the corner. I walked into the waiting room and immediately felt it. The stare. My Aunt Melinda, decked out in pearls and her usual lemon-faced glare, barely gave me a nod. Uncle Ron was flipping through a magazine like he couldn't be bothered to acknowledge I existed. My cousin Lydia, who I hadn't seen since I was a teenager, gave me a smirk that I could only describe as oily. She whispered something to her brother, Corey, and they both snickered. I ignored it. When the lawyer, Mr. Prescott, finally called us in, I walked into the mahogany-trimmed conference room trying to stay quiet, respectful. The moment I sat down, Melinda leaned over and muttered, "This is just a formality, Julian. We already divided everything. You weren't included for a reason." Her voice dripped with the same condescension I remembered from childhood. Grandma just wanted to make it official. I didn't say anything. I almost believed her. I mean, why would I be included? I wasn't part of their world. I didn't own a house, didn't have kids, or a flashy job. I was just the quiet kid who drifted away after his mother died. Then Mr. Prescott cleared his throat. "If I may," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Eleanor Bradford's last will and testament is brief, but quite clear." He opened the folder and began to read. I expected the usual legal lingo, something about cherished memories and splitting heirlooms. Instead, he said, the entirety of the Bradford estate, including assets, properties, financial holdings, and possessions, is to be passed in full to one individual. That individual is Julian Everett. The room went completely still. I didn't even breathe. Melinda blinked like someone had slapped her. "I'm sorry, what?" she barked, sitting forward. "That's not right. There must be some mistake. We already divided." She specified it multiple times, Mr. Prescott said calmly, tapping the folder. "Her last 3 amendments all state the same thing. Leave everything to Julian Everett. No exceptions." Uncle Ron stood up so fast his chair screeched against the floor. His eyes were fixed on me, but not in shock, in fury. He hasn't been around. He didn't take care of her. He didn't earn this. She made her decision, Prescott replied, unfazed. Legally, it's airtight. Melinda looked like she was about to faint. Lydia was whispering urgently to her brother, who looked pale. And me? I was still stuck somewhere between disbelief and panic. I didn't know what any of this meant. The estate? What estate? Grandma lived in an old house and gave me $500 once. What estate? Then Uncle Ron leaned over the table, his knuckles white against the wood. "If he wants war," he said, his voice low, trembling with rage, "he'll get it." I just sat there, stunned. I didn't say a word. They stormed out one by one. Melinda was muttering something about contesting the will. Lydia was crying, I think for dramatic effect, and Corey kicked the door on his way out. Only Mr. Prescott remained, offering me a thin smile and motioning for me to stay seated. I think we should talk about what exactly you've inherited, he said gently. It's considerable. I remember swallowing hard and nodding. But my mind wasn't on the assets. It was on Ron's words. If he wants war. It echoed in my head like a drumbeat. Because that's exactly what I got. And I had no idea just how ugly it was going to get. I didn't sleep much that night. I went back to my tiny apartment and sat in the dark with a glass of water, staring out the window as headlights passed below. My phone kept buzzing. Unknown numbers, probably my aunt or her kids trying to corner me. I didn't answer any of them. I kept thinking about the last time I saw Grandma Eleanor. It was about a year ago. I'd taken a bus to visit her after she sent me a card that just said, "Let's have tea soon. I miss you." She looked smaller than I remembered, like her bones were shrinking under her cardigan. But her voice was sharp, her mind intact. We talked for hours. She asked about my job, my apartment, if I'd met anyone. She never brought up the rest of the family. Before I left, she hugged me longer than usual and said, "One day soon, Julian. I want you to remember you were always seen." At the time, I thought she just meant she was proud of me. I didn't realize she'd been planning something. The next morning, I met Mr. Prescott again at his office. He handed me a binder and a set of keys. Inside were copies of account statements, property titles, business holdings, and a personal letter from Grandma. She'd written it in her careful, looping script. "My sweet Julian, if you're reading this, then you already know the truth. I left everything to you. I've watched for years as the others twisted themselves with entitlement. You never asked for anything. You never demanded, guilt, or bragged. You just loved. I hope what I've left can help you build a life you choose and protect you from the ones who'll try to take it. I'm sorry for the storm this will cause, but I trust you'll weather it. Love always, Grandma Eleanor." I sat in that office for nearly 20 minutes without saying a word. It turns out Grandma Eleanor wasn't just a retired schoolteacher. She'd quietly invested in rental properties after Grandpa died and owned 3 apartment buildings downtown, all fully paid off and generating monthly income. She had investments in blue-chip stocks, a beach house in Delaware, and even a vintage book collection appraised at 6 figures. All of it was mine now. By Friday, the calls turned to messages. Melinda sent one that read, "You know she was sick." She didn't understand what she was doing. Ron emailed me directly, a wall of legal threats and accusations, claiming undue influence, manipulation, emotional abuse. I'd barely seen them in years, but suddenly I was being painted as a scheming puppet master. Then the social media posts began. Lydia wrote a long, teary post on Facebook about the betrayal of family and how some people take advantage of the elderly for personal gain. I woke up one morning to find my photo, taken from LinkedIn, slapped on a Twitter thread by Corey, accusing me of fraud. A few of my coworkers saw it and asked questions. One even joked, "Hey, if you're rich now, buy us lunch." I laughed it off. On the outside, I tried to stay calm. But inside, I was unraveling. Every night, I checked my locks twice. Every day, I kept expecting some envelope with a lawsuit to arrive, and eventually, it did. A thick packet from my uncle's attorney. They were formally contesting the will, alleging Eleanor was not of sound mind. They claimed I manipulated her during her final years, coerced her to isolate from family, and that I had secretly guided her financial decisions. I was stunned, angry, but worst of all, I was hurt, because the truth was, I hadn't been there as much as I could have. I worked too much. I didn't call as often as I should have. And now, these people, these distant, bitter relatives, were using that against me. Mr. Prescott was calm, though. He explained their challenge wouldn't go far. The will is recent, signed in front of 2 neutral witnesses. We have medical records showing her clarity of mind, and she made the same decision across 3 versions of her will, going back nearly 5 years. Still, the court date was set. The legal process was grinding forward. And then, things got personal. One evening, I came home to find my mailbox pried open. Papers missing. I reported it, but nothing came of it. A week later, someone spray-painted the word "thief" across my front door in red. My landlord threatened to evict me if I didn't resolve the drama. I started noticing a car parked across the street late at night. Same SUV, always dark-tinted. I wasn't sure if I was paranoid or if Ron really was watching me. One night, I snapped a photo of the plates, but they didn't show up in any registry I could access. I started sleeping with a bat next to my bed. Mr. Prescott offered to connect me with a private security consultant. Your grandmother anticipated backlash, he said, but not this level of hostility. Then came the last straw. A month after the will reading, I got a letter in the mail, no return address. Inside was a photocopy of a photo from when I was 10 years old, me and my mom, standing on Grandma's porch. Written across it in marker were the words, "This was never yours to take." That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the letter, feeling something shift inside me. They wanted war? Fine. They were going to get it. The next morning, I called Mr. Prescott and said 5 words I hadn't expected to hear from my own mouth. I want to go on offense. He paused. Julian, are you sure? Yes, I said. They've been dragging my name through the mud. And I let them. I just kept hoping it would blow over. But it won't. Not until I show them I'm not the scared kid they remember. He didn't argue. That week, he arranged for me to meet a litigation attorney, a woman named Fiona Marks. She was sharp, no nonsense, and had a reputation for being scorched earth when necessary. I explained everything: the vandalism, the fake social media posts, the stalking, even the letter. She listened carefully, then leaned back in her chair and said, "All right, we're not just going to defend. We're going to dismantle." We started with a formal cease and desist sent to Melinda, Ron, Lydia, and Corey, citing defamation, harassment, and intimidation. It was full of legal jargon, but it boiled down to, back off, or you'll regret it. Corey took his tweets down within 24 hours. Lydia blocked me on everything. But Melinda? She responded with a handwritten letter, trying to sound diplomatic, but loaded with guilt-tripping lines like, "Your mother would be so disappointed in you." And Ron doubled down. He posted a rant on Facebook so full of venom it looked like a manifesto, accusing me of being a gold-digging leech who brainwashed an old woman into cutting off her real family. It got dozens of shares from people I didn't know, old neighbors, family friends who didn't have the full story. Suddenly, I was getting DMs from strangers calling me a fraud. One message said, "Your grandma's turning in her grave." I stopped reading them after that. Meanwhile, Fiona began digging. She filed for a court order demanding access to communication records and internal emails between the other family members. She had a hunch. What she found changed everything. About 2 years ago, shortly after Grandma Eleanor's third revision to her will, Lydia had emailed a notary acquaintance about undoing some documents. The tone was cagey and the timing suspicious. Then there was a message from Ron to Melinda titled Plan B, with an attachment that was mysteriously missing, but metadata showed it had once been labeled Alt and calendar for draft. Fiona brought the evidence to Prescott, and together, they prepared a motion to enter it into court, proving that not only had the family been planning to contest the will, but they may have been trying to forge an alternative one behind Grandma's back, possibly even after she'd finalized the real one. That was the moment the tide began to shift. The court date drew near. By then, I'd moved out of my old apartment, too risky, and was living temporarily in one of the properties Grandma had left me, a modest duplex just outside the city. Quiet neighbors. No drama. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. Then, 2 nights before the hearing, there was a knock at my door. I looked through the peephole. It was Melinda. I almost didn't open it, but some stubborn part of me needed to see what she would say. She was dressed in black, as if mourning, and held a paper folder in her hand. Her expression was tight, unreadable. "Julian," she said, voice trembling with artificial politeness. "Can I come in? Just for a minute." I didn't move. "Say what you came to say." She sighed, glanced over her shoulder as if making sure no one was watching. "Look, you don't understand the pressure we've been under. Your grandmother, she made decisions that didn't make sense. She wasn't thinking clearly. She had full mental capacity, Melinda. The doctors confirmed it. The court will, too." She pursed her lips. "Do you really want to drag the family name through court? Make a public mess of everything? Think of your mother. She wouldn't want this." My jaw tightened. There it was again, using Mom as a weapon, as if she had any right. She'd want me to stand up for myself, I said. Something I should have done a long time ago. Melinda's expression flickered, just for a second, with something closer to contempt. "You'll regret this," she whispered. I didn't respond. I shut the door. The morning of the hearing was cold and gray, like the day of the will reading. I wore a suit Grandma once bought me for a college interview. I hadn't worn it in years, but somehow, it still fit. The courtroom wasn't as grand as I'd imagined. Wooden benches, beige walls, everything sterile and quiet. My aunt and uncle sat at one table, flanked by their lawyer, a stiff-looking man in a navy tie. I sat across from them with Fiona and Mr. Prescott. I didn't make eye contact. The judge entered, and everyone stood. My heart pounded in my chest, but I kept my face neutral. The case began. Their lawyer opened with a dramatic speech, painting me as an estranged, opportunistic grandson who reappeared just in time to reap the rewards. He talked about inconsistent behavior, Eleanor's declining awareness, and how this inheritance is a betrayal of family legacy. Then Fiona stood up. Her voice was calm, steady. Every sentence landed like a brick. She presented the will, 3 versions, all signed and witnessed. She introduced Eleanor's physician's testimony via affidavit, confirming her mental clarity. She referenced the emails between Lydia and the notary, the suspicious alt__draft, metadata from Ron, and even mentioned the Facebook harassment campaign that conveniently ramped up just after the will reading. Then, she said the words I didn't expect to hear. We request a forensic audit of the defendant's communications and devices to determine whether there was an attempt to fabricate legal documents or interfere with an active estate. Ron nearly jumped out of his seat. This is insane, he shouted. She was manipulated. She was an old woman, and he poisoned her against us. The judge banged the gavel once. Sit down, Mr. Bradford. But Ron kept going, eyes blazing, finger jabbing toward me. He doesn't deserve it. He didn't do anything. We were there for her. We cleaned the house. We took care of things. No, I said quietly, finally breaking my silence. You took care of your share. Not her. Melinda looked stunned. The judge narrowed his eyes. Mr. Everett, you'll have a chance to speak in full later. I nodded, and then the judge looked at the papers Fiona had submitted. His brow furrowed. I'll need time to review this new evidence, he said. We'll reconvene next week. Until then, I'm placing a temporary injunction on any claims against the estate and instructing both parties to refrain from public commentary. He banged the gavel again. We stood. I turned to leave, but as I stepped into the hallway, I heard Ron hiss behind me. This isn't over. Not even close. I didn't turn around, because I knew something he didn't. The real storm hadn't even started. I didn't respond to Ron's last threat. I didn't flinch. I just kept walking down the hallway, past the court officers and stale beige walls, toward the parking garage where my car waited. That day, as the echo of his words faded behind me, I realized something. I no longer felt like I had to prove I belonged. Grandma had already proven it for me. I wasn't the outsider anymore. I was the one sitting behind the desk now. Still, I knew the worst was ahead. That week between court dates was a minefield. The day after the hearing, someone left a dead bouquet on my doorstep. Not just flowers, funeral flowers. The tag said nothing, but the message was loud. I called Fiona. She wasn't surprised. They're spiraling, she said calmly. They're watching their inheritance slip through their fingers, and they're lashing out. All we have to do is keep the pressure on. She wasn't exaggerating. Fiona had begun the process of obtaining a digital forensics team, a group of tech specialists who could recover metadata, deleted emails, and system logs. She also subpoenaed communications between the notary Lydia contacted and her father. Things were moving fast. That Friday, I met with Mr. Prescott again, this time in his private office. He looked different, less formal, more personal. He poured 2 glasses of tea and slid a manila envelope across the desk. This, he said, was meant for you, but only if things got ugly. I opened it. Inside was another letter from Grandma Eleanor. This one wasn't dated. It was typed, not handwritten. Julian, if you're reading this, then my fears came true. I hoped they would accept my decision. But I know my children. They see the world through entitlement and tradition, not love or fairness. I chose you not to spite them, but because you are kind, quiet, steady. I am proud of you. Don't let them bully you out of what is rightfully yours. If they try to fight, let them. But remember, they can't take what they never built. That night, I cried. For her. For Mom. For the boy I used to be, who always felt like a ghost in his own family. By the time the next hearing arrived, everything had shifted. Fiona submitted the findings from the digital forensics team. Turns out, Ron had downloaded a will template, identical in format to Eleanor's, and filled it out with different names. His, Melinda's, and their children's. He dated it 1 week after the official will was signed, but the document data showed it was actually created 3 months later. Worse, there were emails between Ron and a different notary, asking if a will signed by an Alzheimer's patient can be challenged if the previous one wasn't notarized properly. The notary declined and reported the exchange after being contacted by Fiona. When all this was presented to the court, Melinda went pale. Her lips quivered. Lydia stared down at her lap like a child caught cheating on a test. Corey didn't even show up. But Ron? He stood. Again. Your Honor, he said, his voice brittle and desperate. She was our mother. This was never about money. It was about justice. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Bradford, you and your family attempted to forge documents, harass the named beneficiary, and slander his reputation publicly, all while undermining a legally sound and repeatedly affirmed last will and testament. This was never about justice. This was about greed. Ron opened his mouth, then closed it. The gavel fell. The will stood. The estate remained mine. The challenge was dismissed with prejudice, meaning they couldn't reopen the case. What's more, the judge allowed Fiona's request to file civil charges for defamation and emotional distress, and referred the forgeries to the DA's office for review. By the time I walked out of that courtroom, I was no longer afraid of them. I had nothing left to prove. I just had work to do. Over the next few weeks, I moved slowly, carefully. I had Fiona draft a restraining order against Ron after a car followed me home one too many times. Melinda called twice, once to beg, once to curse, and I recorded both. Lydia posted a video online apologizing for the misunderstanding, but it was clearly a legal tactic to reduce damages. I ignored her. Instead, I poured myself into what Grandma had left behind. I hired a management firm to help oversee the rental properties and renovate a few of the units that had gone neglected. I found a nonprofit that refurbished old books and donated them to schools, and gave them Grandma's library, except for one shelf. That shelf sits in my home office now. And then, slowly, something surprising began to happen. Neighbors of my grandmother, people I barely remembered from childhood, started reaching out. One woman, Mrs. Tucker, dropped off a pie and told me, "Your grandmother talked about you constantly. Said you were her greatest joy in life." An old friend of Eleanor's sent me a photo of them in college, smiling on the steps of a library. On the back, she'd written, "He's got her eyes." I kept every note, every memory, every small kindness. They became a shield against the storm that came before. As for the rest of the family, Melinda eventually settled the civil suit privately, a six-figure sum, negotiated under the condition that she publicly retract her accusations. She did, but not before trying to sneak in a non-disclosure clause, which Fiona flatly refused. Ron didn't go down as quietly. The DA filed misdemeanor charges for attempted fraud, and although he avoided jail, he was fined and placed under court supervision for a year. His reputation in town took a hit, especially when the newspaper ran a story titled, "Man Forges Mother's Will to Steal Estate from Grandson." It wasn't subtle. Lydia and Corey faded into the background. I haven't heard from them since. I still think about Grandma often. Sometimes when I'm walking through one of the buildings she bought, or flipping through her recipe book, or reading one of her letters. She wasn't rich in a flashy way. She built slowly, like a gardener planting one seed at a time. And now that garden is mine to tend. Sometimes people ask if I'm glad it happened, if I feel victorious. I don't. This wasn't a win. It was a reckoning. But I am at peace. And I finally understand what she meant when she said, "Don't let them take what they never built." They tried. But I'm still standing.